Well, good afternoon, everybody. Google gave us 20 minutes to hope to package all things about Africa in 20 minutes, which is tough. And I think we've been asked to talk about Africa, the promise of the continent. And in my discussion with Ngozi, we agreed to touch on a few things. The young people of Africa, African resources, the issue of democracy, which I understand was a subject which we talked about early this morning. I think we need to also touch on that, and tech in Africa. So let's start maybe with my sister here about the economic potential of Africa.
Well, thank you. You know, Mo said he was supposed to interview me and have a conversation, and I said, not on your life. You won't get away with asking all the questions. You'll have to speak. Well, if you want to start with the economy, maybe I can say a few words, maybe some things that people may not know, and then we can switch back. Usually when people talk about Africa, they have an image. We need to look at the long-term trends and potential of the continent. People will not know that 6 of the 10 fastest growing economies today are in Africa. And they are growing at between 6 to 7% and better. You know, countries like Senegal, Rwanda, Tanzania, and so on. There are at least 6 of them that are among the fastest growing. People don't usually have that image. People do not know that Africa's market, you know, there are 1.2 billion consumers, 1.2 billion people on the continent. So this is the equivalent to China or India. And there's a rising middle class. There's a $4 trillion opportunity right now in terms of both household and business expenditure and consumption on the continent that businesses are not aware of. So if you don't try to establish yourself on the continent now, you're missing out. There's demographics.
Let's talk about young people later on.
Okay.
If we stop for a moment.
All right.
Here.
So just one last fact on the economy. Africa is the fastest urbanizing continent. We're adding 24 million people a year to our cities. And by 2030, we will have 3 of the 13 largest megacities. And there, productivity is high. You know, so there's a great potential if you can tap into the cities. So there are just a lot of facts that people don't know.
Pick up on the issue of image. It always fascinated me when I talk to people out of Africa and say, if you close your eye and think of Africa, what do you think? The most common answers come to me are actually 2 different answers. One answer is, oh, I think of beautiful, elegant giraffes. You know, moving majestically, and you know, amazing royal lions, and so this is one picture of Africa. This is a beautiful, real-life zoo, and the second popular vision is that of starving kids, and refugee camps, and disease, and it's a sick continent really. And you can imagine the first picture, of course, is propagated by the tourism industry. The second one is propagated by our friends in Oxfam and Save the Children, etc., who always in Christmas want to go out to raise some money. How can you raise money? You show pictures like that. I understand it's a good intention, but also it backfires in drawing the image. And unfortunately, you ask people to say, Africa is a continent of sick people? You guys are crazy. Who won the marathon here in London? It's Africans. Who's gracing our football matches? Africa. We run faster than anybody, higher than anybody. We dance better than anybody. Africa, no, I mean, Africa is a healthy continent. So I really hope that we normalize Africa. We move this mystery from around Africa. It's just a normal place with normal people. Maybe we are more elegant than other people, but it's okay.
Maybe normal challenges and normal successes.
Yeah. Let's talk about young people. Yeah. That's, I think, a very interesting subject. I mean, we have African demography is completely different from, from the rest of the world. We have a huge bulge of young people, and that really dominates our demographic profile compared with Europe, Japan, etc. And it was amazing the oldest guy when we had the Olympics here in London, the oldest guy was Japanese in the equestrian competition. I think he was 64 years old. The youngest was an African guy at 14 years old. That, I think, captured the difference between Japan and Africa. It's just
maybe I can add some numbers.
Yeah.
You know my trade. So if you imagine by 2030, I think 25% or so of people in Europe will be 65 and older. And close to that in the Asias, 17% in the Americas, but in Africa it's just 6%. So that will give you, just to illustrate what Mo was saying, 6%.
Yeah. Talking about data, it is very interesting, the misconception about data. I spend most of my time, I live in Europe actually, and we have a big crisis in Africa about migration. You all know that. Right-wing parties coming to power in Italy, in Poland, in Hungary, etc., on one really premise. That is, we are being swamped by African migrants. Merkel almost lost her appeal in Germany over the issue of the migration, etc. And every year we have a big conference in Africa. Our foundation, as a platform for civil society, we have this conversation. But we publish research work. We believe in data. I love the last conversation about data, facts, because I think this is an interesting issue. And we did some digging into the numbers. Migration actually discovered was a worldwide phenomenon. It's not just Africans who migrate. Everybody migrates. 37 million people migrated in 1917. And the interesting thing is the African share of international migration is 14%. European, 24%. So there's more European migrants than African migrants. And then 70% of the African migration is in Africa. It's not to Europe or Asia or any. Most of the migration happening in Africa. When you put these numbers, you can see how misconceptions and misunderstanding of the exact demographic situation. Furthermore, we found actually that migrants contribute more than the proportional share of the GDP of the countries they migrate to. They are not a burden on the whole service because they are young. They are not too old or too young who require too much medical attention, etc. We had our conference in Côte d'Ivoire. That country hosts 6 million immigrants. 6 million in one country in Africa from neighbor countries. The government didn't fall, or there's no problem. Actually, the president, in the conversation in the conference, he said actually those guys contribute over 20% of the GDP of the country. We're very happy to have them. That is an interesting lesson for us maybe to hear from.
Maybe another way to put it is that if the world worked well, by 2050 you have 1.1 billion workers, on the continent, which will be more than China, India, or any other place. That this could be, if the world worked well, it could become a global resource. Because with the proper skills, you can imagine a situation where populations are aging elsewhere. You have a young population, so it could really be a win-win. If we had this free flow of ideas, free flow of capital, but no free flow of labor. So it could become a positive externality for the rest of the world, if the world were willing to tap into it. But I think what is happening is we know that's not going to be the case. So, but there you are. It's at least important to go away with the idea that there is a way to increase productivity all around, to have a win-win situation.
But we also need to really revisit our education system. our education system is a relic from the colonial times. It aims at producing administrators and clerks. It's completely disconnected from the job requirements of the modern economy. So we have been campaigning to get business and civil society engaged in the process of education, devising the curriculum vitae, etc., because we need job for employment. I was in a meeting with the African chancellors, university chancellors. They had a big meeting, and I was inquiring with, what they're doing actually. And I found that 27% of our university graduates study humanities. 2% study agriculture. And I said, excuse me, but agriculture ought to be the main strength of Africa. We have a huge land, a huge amount of arable land, which is not developed. We need those guys. But 27% of our graduates study humanities with respect to Shakespeare and Molière. But we cannot just recite those guys and get the Chinese to build our bridges and our ports and our electricity. We need technical people, we need technical schools to really fill in this clear gap. That's a challenge for us.
Look at this photograph.
That is
it's
what
also
you're pushing.
changing.
That's pushing for, and why you are pushing Google to get involved in Africa. And I think a number of people I'm harassing are sitting around this room. I do apologize, but we need to push you to get really involved in the training process. And they promised to train 10 million people. And I really need to see that. Matt, we have been talking about this, and we're pushing you. You guys need to do your bit there. But those are big consumers of Google products, so it is a win-win situation.
But can I say something about technology and young people? I find that, well, first of all, on the continent, the number of mobile subscribers, you should know more. We are 1.2 billion people, and we now have 759 million mobile subscribers. So the kinds of technology that will change things in Africa will not be your big moonshot ideas, but maybe simple things like, when you can use electronic vouchers to get to farmers so they can buy e-vouchers they can use to buy fertilizers directly from small dealers, as we did in Nigeria in the village, and avoid the middlemen who divert the fertilizer for corruption. You can text these vouchers to them directly, they can take it, and the dealers can go to the bank and cash it. That is something new that is helping us solve a problem of productivity, but also of corruption. You think about this issue of the drones that are now being used to deliver blood and vaccines in Rwanda and Ghana. We are now using drones because the terrain is very hilly, the people are not easy to access, and you can't build roads everywhere. So instead of 4 hours to deliver blood or vaccines, it's now taking 20 minutes from a control center in Kigali. They're able to send these supplies by fixed-wing drones into remote areas in Rwanda. And it's so successful, we're doing it in Ghana and Tanzania. So we now have, we can leapfrog, we can solve some of our challenges through simple use of technology. And I think it's encouraging people to think of those ideas, not the big things, but maybe the small things that can change the lives and help us overcome these challenges. I think that's where the interest.
Right, we have 3 minutes left. I think I want to say something about democracy in Africa. And African people really believe in democracy. And I haven't attended, unfortunately, the early session. I had other commitment. But I hear that there was some skepticism about the future of liberal democracy. I don't know if you have seen the long queues of people trying to vote in Africa, and any African collection. People queue 6-7 hours in the sun to vote. I don't believe many people in this room are willing to queue for 6 or 7 hours under a harsh sun to vote. the voting percentage, I mean, participation is over 80%, 85%, 90%. People try to vote. In this country, if we get 56% voters percentage, we say, wow, people have been engaged. So people believe in democracy. Unfortunately, time after time, elections have been stolen in Africa. And that is the worry, is that people lose confidence in the electoral process, especially when people turn a blind eye to what happened in DRC. The election was stolen in daylight. The guy who had won it got over 62% of the votes. 40,000 observers deployed by the church, the Catholic Church in DRC, confirmed the numbers. And yet it was stolen. And everybody was quiet. I didn't hear all those liberal Democrats in Europe and America say anything, which is really sad. People should stand up for democracy. It is this complacency which is destroying our world, in my view. In Sudan, that's my own country. I don't know how many people are aware that Sudan has been ruled by an Islamist dictatorship, military dictatorship for the last 30 years. Came by a military dictator, military coup, continued for 30 years. Those people killed 300,000 people in Darfur. Declared jihad against our people in the south. 1.5 million people died in the south. They stole the country blind. 70% of the budget is out, never discussed in public. It is secret budget, 70%. That is the president's prerogative, which is been the militia, military, army. They created 4 different kind of military militias to balance the army. That is the kind of control Bashir, who is actually been chased by the ICC, International Criminal Court. And for 30 years, they destroyed the traditional political parties. It's gone, either by coercion or by them out. Out of the blue, the young people in Sudan rose up in revolt for 5 months daily. Those guys have been demonstrating in 60, 70 countries in Sudan. And they forced, at last, the disposal of Bashir. They're continuing their battle against the Transitional Military Council because they insist on a civilian council. This is an amazing event in support of democracy. And unfortunately, the West is silent. Did not even notice that. That's the best endorsement of democracy you guys can hope for. And nobody is standing up and saying, wow, look at the Democrats in Sudan, what they're trying to do. This is the young people. And I think we should finish by showing what was amazing is the women was in the forefront of all these demonstrations. 92 people have been killed, shot. Thousands have been injured, shot. Yet, young women was in the forefront in the leadership of these demonstrations. And I think we should give a big hand to those young African women. And I want you to watch this short video here, if you can play it, please, about the young women of Sudan standing up for democracy and defeating the military machines of those Islamist guys. Well, this is young women of Sudan destroying a military regime in Sudan. This is the wonderful young people of this continent who are fighting for democracy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, you know, Mo had said that he was supposed to have a conversation with me, and I said, you have to speak up too, but I think I made a mistake. Because I hardly got a word in. It's fantastic.
Okay, thank you very much.
Well, aren't we taking questions?
Do we have time for questions? I think we're on. One question, okay. Let's have one good question, tough question, and Ngozi will answer.
No, you will. No question. Oh,
okay, sister over there.
You should say who you are, Billy.
Okay, I did introduce earlier. My name is Ibrahim Oshika. I chair First Bank of Nigeria. And my question is, the challenge, I've always considered that the unenlightened electorate is a major challenge to democracy. And I guess when I think of America and all of its issues now and the issue of fake news, the session before you, and you take it back into Africa and you think that even without all of our young people being as educated as they should be, they are actually enlightened in terms of what they seek and the governance. So the issue is bridging the worlds together and realizing that there's so much to learn from Africa, even with its disadvantages, even as there's a lot that we are learning from the developed worlds, and tying the link between the two worlds for us to achieve our goals.
Thank you. I think
It's a comment.
The comment and good statement. I think we all can learn from this young Sudanese woman. How many people in this room are willing to die for democracy? Those people are willing to die for democracy. Yeah? Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mom. Thank you so much.